Yo, it's Austin. We live in an era where video games are being remade and remastered left and right. Want to play Final Fantasy VII? Well, you can digitally on just about anything. However, not every game gets a remake, but more importantly, not every game deserves a remake. Let's talk about those poor unfortunate souls today, the games that have aged poorly. It's always a sad day when you go back and boot up a game you used to love, only to find out that it's not quite how you remember it. It's the same thing with any medium, be it movie, anime, music, or fashion. However, unlike those things, video games seem to age way harder than any movie has. You might be able to sit down and still find a way to enjoy an 80s movie, no problem, but booting up Goldeneye will give you a bit of a shocker. Now, there's tons of games that could qualify for this type of video, but I'm gonna shoot for examples that mean a little more to me. If I said Sonic Adventure, or Goldeneye, or hell, Resident Evil, that would be basically another one of those YouTube videos with the same shit. Like, yeah, we all know Sonic Adventure is a little janky. We get it, every YouTuber. So throw away your Watch Mojo lists, pull up a chair, and listen to me, some dude who willingly broke his own heart multiple times for this, because we're gonna get started with Brave Fencer Musashi. Oh no, not Musashi, a handful of you might say, but oh yes, Musashi. Deep in the trenches of SQUARESOFT's, in my opinion, golden age, Brave Fencer Musashi kinda popped out of nowhere and surprised. Square were no stranger to releasing games that aren't RPGs, having put out the Bushido Blades, Tobal No. 1 and 2, the side-scrolling shmup Einhander, and even the survival horror-inspired Parasite Eve. 1997 through 2000 saw Squaresoft releasing high-quality games left and right, almost too much. Hironobu Sakaguchi came up with this idea that had real Japanese philosopher and swordsman Miyamoto Musashi being essentially a summon that could be brought to life across different generations in order to defend the world. A legend in concept, but a character due to the fact that Musashi's personality could be different each time. This idea could easily be utilized similarly to Mad Max or James Bond. One time he's Tom Hardy, the other time he's a big racist, but on the surface alone, Musashi had potential. And guess what? It did well. Reportedly selling over 1 million copies worldwide, thanks in partial to the packaged Final Fantasy VIII demo, audiences and critics at the time seemed to take well to Musashi, myself included. While I never got a chance to finish the game as a kid, I had this demo disc with Musashi on it, and I must have played that bad boy like 40 times. Being a 3D action RPG, Musashi dressed to impress. The weapon copying mechanic seemed like it would have had a lot to it. The camera angle would change depending on the scene, making action dynamic. One moment you're taking dudes from above, the next you're running down the side of a tower or throwing around giant bosses. Dialogue was quirky, weird, decently voice acted, and hell, even funny at times. If you were around at this time and paid attention to voiceovers, there's no way you can misplace our main boy Musashi. Voiced by Mona Marshall, Musashi was basically the same voice from Izzy from Digimon, or Kite and Dot Hack, and for some reason, Kyle's mom in South Park? I didn't know about that one. I had no idea.
The name's Musashi, you geezer!
This, alongside Mystical Ninja starring Goemon for the Nintendo 64, were some of my first exposures to anything anime, and Musashi sure was visually adorable. That's not just aesthetically either. The music by Tsuyoshi Sekita was really strong and memorable. The concept of the kingdoms and people being named after food and the villains' sodas was goofy as shit, even if it was changed from being alcohol in the Japanese version. All-you-can-eat kingdom and the Thirst Quencher Empire's conflict might have been straight up paint by the numbers, plot-wise, but the fantasy samurai aspect of it all was something truly unique. Musashi was a pretty damn cool game from what I played and what I've been told, but having finally gotten around to it, I'm not really sure if it's held up. I mean, you saw that coming, that is what this video's about. Simply put, Brave Fencer Musashi just doesn't play well. Your combos are very limited and stiff. The ability copy system is hardly used cleverly in combat, and instead for puzzle type situations that'll have you consulting a strategy guide.
Musashi!
While the variety to gameplay is quite nice, some of the mini-games will have you frustrated as all hell. The waterfall segment comes to mind as something that's irritating, but oh, I'm not gonna forget about the main offender, Steamwood. motherfucking Steamwood. The local factory is about to explode for some reason, and you're on a tight time limit to go around and turn off switches to prevent it all from coming down. The odd camera angle in this segment and the janky controls make it really easy to fall off the platform and have to climb all the way back up from the beginning. But since we're timed, you gotta get moving. Musashi only allows you to save in the main town, so if you fail and get a game over, which you will, you gotta backtrack all the way from town. This wouldn't be so bad if it was just once, but it's twice! Even harder the second time. Shit fucking sucks! Brave Fencer Musashi was the first game I streamed for my Patreon game club last year, and it's unfortunate that my infatuation with it turned into disappointment. Musashi would go on to get a sequel, Musashi Samurai Legend, which is allegedly really bad.
Howdy do.
I've hardly touched this one, but I'm sure for you guys I will at some point, even if it's to Nomura for Nomura Man. It's unfortunate that by the time I got to Brave Fencer Musashi, it didn't really age that great, but that's okay, I guess. However, the next game we're doing is one that I actually played quite a bit growing up, and I'm sure some of you guys have also played Devil May Cry. How topical. With Devil May Cry 5 being shown at E3 at the time of writing this, I figured I would go brush up on some old school DMC in order to get prepped. Seeing Nero and the new girl being all extra, old Dante popping into frame, fucking pull my devil trigger, baby! Okay, maybe not the music video though. So, I slapped in my DMC HD collection, which is not a great port by the way, only to be greeted with two things. Number one, Devil May Cry 3 is still rad as shit, and two, the original Devil May Cry has not held up very well at all. As some of you might know, this Hideki Kamiya directed game was initially supposed to be Resident Evil 4. However, Kamiya and producer Shinji Mikami weren't quite on the same page as to what a Resident Evil should be, leading to the birth of a new IP. After all, Kamiya wanted to make a cool game with cool characters, and everyone knows that Resident Evil isn't cool. It sits there dark in its miserable boulder-punching existence.
Stay alert!
With permission from other staff at Capcom, Mikami basically signed off on the idea as a new thing entirely, and Devil May Cry was born. Even if it still really feels like Resident Evil at times. What with the angled cameras, pointless puzzle solving, and key grabbing, and nonsensical dialogue. Seriously, I've played DMC a bunch of times in the last 16 years or whatever, and I still have a hard time really understanding what's going on in this game. It's not that Devil May Cry is bad, far from it. It's just that when you compare it to other games in the series, the gameplay has evolved so much that the original just feels static. Someone's gonna get hella mad at this, but DMC feels closer to a God of War game than a newer Devil May Cry like 3, 4, or even, to some extent, DMC. DMC has a really limited combo system. Sure, you could say that about DMC as well, but I'd rather play with Dante than the really archaic original at this point. Is that heresy? I know someone's probably typing up a storm at the moment, but believe me when I say I'm not going for a low blow. Having no control of the camera turns simple platforming and combat into a chance-based nightmare. The low weapon variety and hindered combo systems just feel lackluster based on what we got. It's amazing that we would get huge enhancements to the franchise in 3 with the style selection system and just better everything, but the original DMC just doesn't feel good anymore. Granted, I'd rather play it than Devil May Cry 2, but that game always sucked. It's frustrating when an honest attempt at a boss results in failure, while mashing it out with the same 2 attacks will take it out no problem. It's clear that Kamiya and the team at Capcom were revolutionary with this concept, basically creating the foundation for the third-person character action games that are still popular today. DMC is a bit of a proto-that, half Resident Evil puzzle-solving nightmare with an absolutely baffling story. Devil May Cry 1 and 2 were still doing their best to be taken seriously from a narrative standpoint, which thankfully they dropped over time because it's just too goofy and ridiculous. If you were to start on this franchise, I'd recommend hopping into 3 or 4, both of which have stood the test of time. Dante's a cool guy doing cool things, and he deserves the best. Here's to DMC 5. Give us big jumpy flips, big cringy dialogue, and dumb. Give the dumb. A lot of my issues with Devil May Cry also extend into what we're about to talk about. So, this next game came out when I was working at a Game Crazy, if any of you guys remember that.
You heard it right, K-Dog. Gale is getting extremely jiggy with it by going for the MVP.
We were all basically trained to like pick a game that was on the horizon or one that had just come out and learn pretty much everything that we could about it in an attempt to like sell it or push pre-orders, you know. So once upon a time, I bought a game called Afro Samurai, and you know I was pushing that shit. And you know what? Afro Samurai kicked ass. In 2009. This one makes me really sad. I initially picked this game for an entirely different video you'll see soon, but ended up playing it and being like, oh no, was I wrong? The Afro Samurai game is a hell of a strange thing to exist. What originally started as an indie doujin turned into a 5-episode anime and movie nearly 7 years later. Apparently, a producer from the Japanese anime studio Gonzo stumbled upon a few Afro Samurai toys and was like, oh shit, let's make an anime. The trailer for that anime got seen by Samuel L. Jackson, who loved it, got on board, and recruited the RZA from the Wu-Tang Clan to make a soundtrack. Like, how lucky is that? The anime itself is pretty okay. It's dark, depressing, it's weirdly stylistic, and certainly one of the most unique things I've seen come out of the anime industry. I'm not sure if I really like it, but it's pretty neat. And around the time of the movie Afro Samurai Resurrection, Namco Bandai put out a video game simply called Afro Samurai. Afro follows, Afro and his quest to become number one. Number one referring to the strongest swordsman in the world. The number one murdered his father, and so he wants to get revenge. It's pretty simple and sweet, although a little generic. But the total aesthetic package kinda ties that all together. Afro Samurai's art style translates perfectly into video game, even nearly 10 years later. Some cutscenes might look a little strange, but the wavy hair physics and headbands still look great. In fact, some of the systems Afro has are really innovative. As a character action game, it had the fast-paced action of Devil May Cry, but it also introduced the precision cutting system that Metal Gear Rising would adopt. You can slow down time and cut enemies in specific ways, decapitating or disarming them. Afro, like the anime, is quite violent, but the awesome soundtrack by the RZA ties it all together. But, and that's one big fucking but, actually playing through the game nowadays feels rough, man. The camera jolts around all over the place, the lack of a proper lock-on system means you're slashing pretty randomly. Granted, a lot of Afro's swings will go all over, but there's a lack of feedback in most of your attacks that makes them all feel pretty weak. The main thing you want to do here is hold out until you can charge a freeze attack, but it's never guaranteed to kill or even connect since some enemies will dodge out of it. Not to mention the boss fights where all the mechanics you've learned so far go out of the window and the game turns into a parry dodge fest. A very clunky one where transitions feel dated as all hell. And that's not just the game either. The transition in the first big battle into Afro being slammed onto the ground immediately into a cutscene is like, huh? Did I die? Oh, no, it's fine. We've also got hella reused assets with some of the same levels being presented in different times of the day or just retreading. It's kind of a mess in retrospect. It's a shame because I loved this game when I played it like 9 years ago. I hear it got a sequel, the second Afro Samurai game that came out just a couple years ago, but I can't even play that anymore because it's apparently that bad, so maybe someone will let me borrow it, I don't know. Interestingly though, the artist of Afro Samurai, Takashi Okazaki, worked as the art director on Fury, which is actually a pretty decent game. But unfortunately, Afro didn't quite make it. Shame. But I do like that soundtrack, son! Now, while this video is comprised of all games that are entirely subjective by nature, I've been sticking to like PlayStation 1 and on. That's because if you go back any further, like a lot of those games didn't age really well at all. Unless you're Rocket Knight Adventures. Considering a lot of liking a game can come from a place of nostalgia, realizing that you were wrong can be a handful. At this point, I've accepted all of what I liked as a kid is probably terrible. No longer is it Goldeneye is good because me and my friends played it late into the night and it reminds me of being 8 years old. But instead, it's, yo, me and my friends had shit-ass taste. Austin, hurry up and discover Tribes 2, you peasant. And boy, oh boy, did I get that Tribes 2, son. Thanks to the modern gaming industry existing in a, hey, what if we re-release everything kind of state, we can all go back and play these old games, no problem. Hell, some companies only do that. Look at you lately, Konami. and Capcom. With collections like the Sega Genesis one you can find on just about every platform, playing these old games is extremely simple and doable in mere moments. Finding out that something you played as a baby still holds up is always a fantastic feeling. Streets of Rage 2, the classic Sonics, the Shinobis, but what we're gonna talk about today is a Sega Genesis game that not only fails to stand the test of time, but fails to even be on this collection for some reason. I've said this before, but Echo the Dolphin is no good. Yeah, I don't know why every Echo the Dolphin game was omitted from the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One versions of the Genesis collection. Well, I can maybe guess why, because it sucks. But I kind of liked it as a kid. I mean, shit, who doesn't like dolphins? Liars, that's who. I can see a few of Echo's merits. The concept is novel. I mean, shit, you play as a dolphin who travels into alternate dimensions, I think. It's very unclear considering all the Echo lore is just cryptically told to you through one-liners that don't really make sense. I guess the music is okay, but the dumpy Genesis sound chip sure doesn't do atmospheric very well at all. Yeah, I know, there's a Sega CD version of all of these games with the intended versions of these songs, and they're actually pretty cool. Also on that CD is a few FMVs of SeaWorld capturing contractors scoping out targets, so that's pretty cool. But all in all, playing through Echo feels like a slog. There's barely a sense of direction, even with Echo's mapping ability that only shows his immediate radial surroundings. Also, you yell at the crystals in order to make other crystals move for you, and then they sometimes spawn back. Unfortunately, I don't really have the patience I used to have with video games, so attempting to get through levels really quick is impossible without getting my ass smashed. Some puzzles, like moving the shell with Echo's face in order to destroy boulders, feel extremely unresponsive. The camera jolts around, you're gonna take constant hits trying to just maneuver. Thankfully, Echo can eat fish to recover HP, but even doing that feels inconsistent. I'll be honest, I wish I could be like this random YouTube comment I found that's all like, older games are way better than newer games because I'm not a fan of FPS or DLC, but alas, I can't. I'll never understand why I or any other hashtag 90s kid was so into Echo the Dolphin back in the day. But I'm just gonna say it's because we were all Finns. That's the fursona term for being into Dolphi. Let me some quotations. Alrighty y'all, we're gonna be taking a look at one more game from a collection of games, this time, Rare Replay. Oh shit, not Rare Replay. You might say, clutching your boxed copy of Blastcore. Well, maybe not Blastcore. That one's pretty cool. If I was in a salty-ass mood and wanted to be a contrarian, I could say every game on this disc. However, that would just be needlessly antagonistic, and I'm just not really into collectathons because they're artificial time wasters that end up sacrificing interesting gameplay or story moments in favor of numbers, but you know, I won't say that, even though I just did. I'm also not gonna say Perfect Dark because the revamped 360 Live Arcade version of that game is actually pretty sweet. So now for the moment of truth. Our Rare Replay game that gives me the most sad feelings over time realizing that I'm getting old is... Banjo-Kazooie. Nah, I'm just kidding, it's JETFORCE Gemini. You see that? I'm gonna call it that one, how you make someone you're dating really mad at you. Valentine's Day 2000. 10-year-old me's little birthday. In the midst of a Chuck E. Cheese deep in the bowels of the ball pit, just fucking touching everything and being gross and nasty and 10, I had no idea what awaited me. Back in the day, Rareware was my shit, and as a kid who loved Banjo, Diddy Kong Racing, but most importantly Blastcore, I was super excited for JETFORCE Gemini. But you see, that was rated T for teenagers, and I wasn't allowed to have that when it came out. But I understood. I would become 13 one day, I thought to myself. Thankfully, I only had to wait a few months into the year 2000 because the parents would be like, hey, you can have it, that's fine, whatever, and that made me a happy boy. All of the promotional material for JETFORCE was so cool to me. A fantastic orchestral soundtrack by the crew at Rare, 3 playable characters including a dog, and there's blood and guts everywhere. As a kid, I tightly held onto my N64 controller and collected the severed heads of ants without a care in the world. As far as I knew, I was 10, and traveling the galaxy collecting weapon and armor power-ups was the best. But then I became sentient. JetForce has potential. In fact, I would say that out of all of the Rareware franchises, yes, all of them, that JetForce could and should have been their main squeeze. It reeks of ambition and love, carefully crafted worlds and interesting characters. The main trio, who are mostly silent, consist of space hunters or police or something called, well, JetForce Gemini. Juno, Vela, and Lupus are on a mission to destroy the main evil guy, Mizar. I mean, it's basically Bug Star Wars, but that translates well into a video game. Travel to different planets, get cool-ass guns. When you think about it, it's kind of like a proto Ratchet and Clank kind of dealio, just, you know, without the funny.
You alright, pal?
JetForce takes itself hella serious, minus a couple of weird jokes about dudes and pants, and that's only the cherry on top of the ice cream sundae of complaints. The way I've been talking about it, you might be like, Austin, it sounds like you like this game, but no, I don't. This controller is no good for shooters. Goldeneye already demonstrated that, and third-person shooters like JetForce Gemini or something like Body Harvest are just like, it's painful. You're unable to properly aim and move simultaneously, so it turns into a weird half-strafe type of thing. Fighting through hordes of enemies, especially flying types, can become a huge pain in the ass. While there's a slight auto-aim when you're running around, anytime an enemy with a shield or something that requires a slight mechanic pops up, it turns into a puzzle against the controls. And let's be real, it's not much better on the Xbox One controller. The remake on Rare Replay has the addition of modern controls, and while they're like slightly better, the terribly dated systems of JetForce just don't lend themselves well to fun. But let's drop everything about controls for a second. Let's say that somehow a super good version of JetForce comes out and the controls are perfect and it's fine and dandy. Here are the things that it wouldn't fix. Unnecessarily large zones filled with nothing. Confusing level design filled with backtracking. Puzzle mechanics that are practically hidden in levels. Slow down anytime more than a few bugs are on the screen, even on the Xbox One version. Oh, and also the entire second half of the fucking game? So like, midway through, and I'm sure a few of you know this, you're tasked with the absolutely unreasonable. You fight Mizar and you win, and then he's like, nah, I'm gonna go blow up the Earth though, and jumps into a meteor with a steering wheel. Sure, that's fine. Throughout the entire game, you've been tasked with rescuing these little pandas called tribals. You then talk to the big chief where he gives you some fresh new armor upgrades, allowing you to use jetpacks, and they actually look kind of cool, before he's like, oh yeah, we can help you, but you have to save us. Every single one of us. Considering they take friendly fire damage, if you accidentally kill one, you gotta go get it again. You can't just re-enter the room, you have to restart the planet level entirely. So let's say you get all but one, and then a single bullet goes astray and it's like, headshot. Oh well, restart. Gotta go get all of them. Certain tribals aren't attainable with certain characters or unless you have certain items. So you might need to go get a key on another planet and bring it back to get all of them again. How many planets do we have? 15. How many different levels to find tribals? 29. How many tribals are there in total? 228. If you do all of the math and divide that by a Nintendo 64 controller, no memorable characters or story, what do you get? You get JetForce Gemini, the most disappointing and aged Rareware game that's ever existed. But you could also round that up to nah. Despite better than average reviews at the time, I guess JetForce didn't sell very well. Considering Rareware was poop shooting games out left and right, I can imagine it got a little left in the dust, especially when it was in between behemoths like Banjo-Kazooie and Donkey Kong 64, which is also not great, but yeah. At the very least, JetForce Gemini gave us advanced dog tech. Lupus has this dedicated HAL button, and that's the best part about this game. Also, his armor upgrades like a tank, and he spreads treads to like float around. It's fucking great. You can't beat that. So those are a couple of games that I don't think have aged well at all. Maybe next time, Rareware. Maybe next time I'll play Donkey Kong 64. Also, hey, if you like this video and want to see more, you should check out my new series, The Combustibles. We just released a video last week on Space Jam, and it's me and my friends Warren and Zach. We're going to be uploading these bi-weekly. I'm really a big fan of what we're doing, and we're going to have another one of these out either Saturday or Wednesday, depending on what happens. So yeah, Y'all's feedback helps us more than anything in the world. Mwah, mwah, kisses for you. Also, if you want to see videos come out more frequently or just, more content in general, be this or the combustibles, make sure to check out the Patreon. I'm going to be adding new tiers here in a little bit to reflect a couple of new things, but all of your support goes directly into the channel and making sure that we can get content out faster. But if we learned one thing today, it's that our previous selves, our uncultured, ill-mannered, high-tempered, moronic versions of ourselves in the past think JetForce Gemini is a good game. And that's all. Good night. Hey, thank you guys so much for sticking to the end and watching. If you liked the video, why not give it a like, share it or something, do whatever you can. Again, shoutouts to all my Patreon supporters. You guys make this all super possible. There will be more content coming up real shortly, so make sure to check out all the social medias and, drop in the Discord, say hi, drop us $1 on Patreon, do whatever you want, man. Just, hey, thank you very much for sitting here to the end and watching. I love you very much. Goodbye.